Hello and welcome to the Let's Talk Azure podcast with your host, Sam Foote.
And Alan Armstrong.
If you're new here, we're a pair of Azure and Office 365 focused IT security professionals. Each episode, we talk about a specific topic in this space. This week, it's episode 2 of season 2. We're going to have a chat around Microsoft Entra, Microsoft's family of tools for modern identity and access management. There's a lot to cover, so strap on in for a wild identity ride. Hey Alan, how are you doing?
I'm doing good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad, thank you. I'm glad we're back into the swing of podcast recording. So yeah, very positive. Very good day.
Yeah, it's good to get back into it.
Cool. So let's have a chat around Microsoft Entra. So I'm going to ask questions to Alan today. Alan is going to be our subject matter expert. If you're new here, our format is that one of us takes on the role of the subject matter expert and the other asks them questions around the chosen subject. What this means is you get a viewpoint from both sides of the fence. We have a, quote, non-technical stakeholder asking questions to a subject matter expert, again in inverted quotes, because some of these technologies can be new. And what this means is that we can have great discussions around the technology, but not just the actual technology itself, but its value and its impact to the business, which ultimately is what is important to drive the adoption of these tools. So, Microsoft Entra, Alan, what is it? And that's probably a pretty big question for this one.
Yes, so probably a month ago now, so beginning of 2022, Microsoft announced Microsoft Entra. So this was a group of products, some of them that they already have, and some new acquisition products being put under the product umbrella Microsoft Entra. So this included Microsoft Azure Active Directory, as we all know, and probably use it day in, day out to access our Office 365. Included a new product, permissions management, and verified identities, which wasn't a previous part of Azure Active Directory, but they've brought out as a separate product now.
Okay, so we're talking about a cohesive family of products in one area now that is focused on identity and access management. Is that right? Is that the main benefit of this new grouping, I'll say, of technology?
Yeah, so I think it's moving, separating the identity piece from Azure, from 365, and putting it into a central place where you can easily manage your cloud identity, being wherever it is, within the Microsoft Cloud Identity at least, anyway. So
do you think previously it was slightly confusing to have Azure Active Directory actually being in Portal, like the Azure portal, and also having like Office 365 administration on the Office 365 side, which effectively was just a more simplified view of Active Directory?
yeah, so I think with the bringing of the coming of the Office 365 world, it's coming into into people's organizations. You didn't really see Azure AD, really. It was just you synchronize your on-premise identity into Office 365, and then you could still sign in with the same credentials, kind of thing. So you didn't really see Azure AD at that point, and then it's kind of morphed into Azure, helping manage that environment as well. And then obviously Azure AD has then evolved, dramatically over the last 3, 4, 5 years now, and we're now at the point where it can be a solid cloud identity that can be secured, that can communicate with, can bring single sign-on into other applications in SaaS on premise, and secure your access and MFA and that. So it's definitely evolved, and I think you're right. It's kind of been, it lived in Office 365 a little bit, and it got the simplified view of it. And then it kind of moved in. You've seen it in Azure AD, and all the more advanced stuff turned up in there. But going on the basis of, you know, Microsoft products sometimes aren't now just Microsoft. As we've seen with some of the rebranding of the other products, it kind of feels like it's not Azure AD, it is Azure AD at the moment, but it's Microsoft Azure AD now. So they're kind of pulling it out and saying, this is a suite of products that can go across multiple, technologies and environments, kind of thing. I think that's where they're going with it, to show that they're not, it's not just if you use Azure AD on Azure or Office 365.
Yeah. So, do you think it's also to simplify sort of the thought process for a potential buyer? They could, if there's if they want to use, let's call it Microsoft, right, as a as a bucket for the moment, because there's lots of names and technology. If somebody wants to use Microsoft technology for identity and access management, before you had to go through that process of, well, it's called Azure Active Directory, right? And that, and it's, so do I need to adopt Azure for my product platform? It's Office 365, so do I need Office 365 and all of that sort of stuff? So perceive, so the perception could have been maybe before that you had to adopt Azure and Office 365 in order to get identity and access management with Azure AD, let's say, right? But now with Entra, is it its own standalone group of products and its own, could a organization like, run it standalone now without anything else around
Yeah,
it?
so I think it'll give the impression of that, like you said, it's separating it from a product naming perspective. Like you said, you could run it on its own before, but you're unsure because you may have had it may have felt like you need Azure, you need to have Office 365 to set it up. It depends on the type of organization, their skills, things like that. Because 365 environments can be spun up without a real technical background, and they can use the simplified, the more user friendly interface to Azure AD to do the create accounts, create mailboxes, etc. So I think this is trying to make everything, one, bring it into its own product suite, so that, like you said, you can just buy Entra, Microsoft Entra, or it's potentially simplifying that interface so that the other security suites that are part of Azure AD, the premiums and the P1s and the P2s, gives the ability for less hardcore Microsoft engineers and things like that to have to manage it, make it simpler for the standard, well, not let's say standard user, but you know what I mean, around that.
Yeah, maybe cater for the
Yeah.
masses, right? And also make it more approachable for organizations of varying
Hmm.
sizes, right? Because smaller organizations now in the future might not be small organizations, so having a more approachable way to handle identity and access management can be a great benefit, and might also dissuade them from looking at other like standalone products for identity and access management, right? Because you might be looking to the market and you might say, okay, I need an identity and access management solution. So you naturally think, I don't want to take on Office 365 and Azure and all of that sort of, and everything, So you go to a third party solution because you think it's going to be more simplistic for your organization. And yeah, and going through that thought
Yeah,
process.
yeah,
What do
and
you think about
there's
that?
probably a bit of a uh, not stigma, but thinking about the on-premise Active Directory and how complex that can be. And then it's just called Azure, so it's Active Directory in the cloud. So that means it's got to be really complex. It takes a whole team to look after it and things like that. When there's in large organizations, yes, you will need a team to look after it, 'cause depending on the users. But for a small organization to spin up Active Directory just to manage devices, or to domain join them and everything, is a lot of work just for that. You don't see the point. where with Azure AD and the other products like Microsoft Endpoint Manager, that can be very simplified onboarding, things like that, into the organization to make things more secure without lifting a finger, really, I guess, in some scenarios.
Okay, so why is Azure Active Directory part of this new Entra product family?
So I think Entra is going to be around the identity access management side of things. So Azure AD makes sense to bring it into the fold, I guess, um, and it will complement some of the. Uh, I guess it's kind of complement some of the other products that are going to come into that, where they've separated some of them. Um, but I think, like we've been talking about just a minute ago, it's more around bringing it into the identity access management for Microsoft into its own portal. So it's just bringing it out of Azure so that they can potentially interface blade interface changes and potentially bring other products and integrations better into that portal.
So at the moment, is it exactly the same as Azure Active Directory? Are the blades just brought in? Is it a new interface? How does it currently look?
So some of the navigation's changed on the left hand side. So it is a more simplified navigation on the left hand side. So you've got your groups and things like that. It's sort of similar to the Office 365 a little bit, but they've got a lot more. It's all around the security products, identity governance, conditional access, MFA, things like that. But at the moment, it is just bringing back the blades from Azure AD at the moment, whilst they go through that transition. So it's more of a reskin at the moment, whilst they change the other main pages. Um, yeah, so just going through transition at the moment.
So if I'm currently using Azure Active Directory, am I going to feel at home in Entra? Does it is it far away from what the current navigation structure is, or do you think it's going to be relatively simple for me to start using Entra?
So the navigation I feel it is better. You don't have to go through. I felt with Azure AD, you had to go through a few layers to get some of the security products. You had to go Azure Active Directory, security, then into the next bit, and then you're finally at the destination. Whilst you could search for some of it at the top, but with this, the key elements are already down the side, so you don't have to dive in too far to get to where you need to.
Okay, so you think more of a logical restructuring more than a rapid an extreme change of what's there before.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. It's definitely more of a navigational side of things rather than a massive change. Um, I definitely feel I'll start using it more now to use Azure AD rather than going to the Azure portal.
Okay, that's a great endorsement for it. So I suppose that's yeah. And the reason why I asked that question is whenever there is anything new, I think it's right for us to investigate it with I'll call it investigate it with caution, right? We're looking for the value that it's going to drive to us, right? We're trying to understand what its pitfalls are and how we might adopt it, right? And also how when we're talking to a non-technical stakeholder of why we should potentially spend time, energy, and focus, on these new products, even though Azure Active Directory isn't a new product, but it is in this, in this product family, right? In the way it's being presented. Um, so to know that they've taken not a giant leap, but maybe a smaller step into moving people into Entra instead of just saying, here's a completely reworked user interface and here's a completely different way for you to manage Azure Active Directory. I think that sounds like a real a bonus to me. Can you just give us a really high level, just a quick primer on what Azure Active Directory actually is and what the high level elements of it are, so we can understand, people that aren't using it at the moment, they can understand what is included in that
Yeah,
area.
sure. So Azure Active Directory is a cloud identity that Microsoft provide. So this is providing a username and password to sign into into a service. So it is mainly, or its sort of first party products are Azure. So using Azure Active Directory allows you to access the Azure infrastructure platform, but as well, it is the identity for the Office 365 suite that Microsoft provide. So that's where it sort of originated, and now it moves on to being able to single sign you into other SaaS applications. So this could be other cloud environments, this could be productivity tools, this could be your this could be, I mean, if we sort of name some products, it could be like the Salesforces, it could be the box.com, the Dropboxes, it could be, that CRM solution that you have. So it's able to bring all those in and not require the user to have a password. They just use that single identity, log into it, and then they can be pushed into those applications without using a password. So it reduces the management of that. Some of the other products, part of it is the security pieces. So this is conditional access, so determining how or where a user can log into. So this is what device they're on, their location, are they in the office, do they need to do MFA, do we control their session so that we can track what the user's doing on a web application. And then you've got the piece around identity governance. So this is sort of going around the access review. So this is checking people's permissions. Do they still need access to that application? Do they need access to that SharePoint site? And being able for the user to request access to an application and have it for 30 days, etc. So that's sort of the really high level views of it. There's lots it does. There's lots you could do.
I know,
It's a
we could probably have about 10 episodes on Azure. That was quite a mean question for me to ask, but I think it's good to understand of what the functionality Entra has day one, right? Like, as in, it's bringing in functionality that they've had for a long time, right? So it's not all new. It's some of it is a reorganization and a reworking of what's currently there. Okay, cool. Let's talk about permissions management. And there's a new area that's been introduced with Entra, which looks pretty exciting.
Yeah, so permissions management. So this is looking at cloud infrastructure and the permissions within those environments. So this is talking Azure, Google Cloud Platform, GCP, and Amazon Web Services, AWS. So this is looking at what permissions users have in those environments and what they actually use in those environments. So there's a big difference there where you may give a user, we're talking sort of the Azure side of things, so contributor access, and actually all they do is look after storage accounts. So which is the equivalent of an S3 bucket in AWS, and that's that is what probably only 10-15% of the permissions they need, but without asking them that they need it or trolling through logs to see what they do over 60, 90 days, whatever it might be, it's very difficult to identify what users actually need.
So traditionally, I'd assume that you'd go into an organization, right, when they would want to do a review of, say, their groups and permissions and whatever the scope is, right? Let's say we're talking about storage accounts because they are pretty dangerous, right? So a customer comes to you and says, I would like you to look at the permissions of our storage accounts and try to identify who really needs different levels of permissions to those storage accounts. And because I'm the non-technical stakeholder here, office politics comes in, and everybody that you talk to says, no, I need owner, I need contributor, I access them all the time, X, Y, and Z. So that's a really pessimistic. I'm sure not everybody in your organization is going to be like that. But what we can do is we can actually objectively now get context around what people are actually using, right? So we can say, the last time Alan Armstrong, wrote a blob to a container was 3 years ago. That's an extreme example, but what you're saying is you're also giving me context. You're not just telling me what access Alan has, you're also telling me the access that Alan is actually using in
Yeah,
that scenario.
absolutely. And it's able to sort of, once it's hooked up, so you have to, in effect, enroll the environments into the Entra permissions management, and it will, in effect, within 24 hours, will troll all the logs and see what the permissions are in Azure or GCP or AWS, and then give you, in effect, a view of actually your score on how much risk there is against the organization, about how much users are using from their permissions, and how much over permissioning is. I guess that's the actual answer, isn't it? It's the over permissioning, and in effect, you can break it down. It will say this, how does this user get this role, and you can see that it's done via a group, or it's done, they're directly assigned to that resource group or subscription or management group. So yeah, you can definitely dive into that data and see um, where people are over permissioned. And I think it is, most of the time you'll find that everyone is. Whether you do cut it down, even with the storage account contributor, they probably don't need even that much. So
It feels like to me that it doesn't really matter because there are, even in a small organization, there are so many different products being used, services, SaaS applications, X, Y, and Z being used, that even over permissioning is probably, and I'm not sure that's the correct term for this, but I assume I'm just going to keep using it, right? But over permissioning is even a problem that can become uncontrollable relatively quickly because of the it's a user with potentially hundreds of permissions, and going through, and also if that user isn't a technical user, which most of them aren't, actually understanding that they know the differences between all of the different levels to try and work out which one would be most appropriate, right, is kind of, that seems like a really complicated task to go through, whereas this comes at it from completely the other side, doesn't it? So it feels massively powerful to me. It seems very exciting.
yeah, so I think the statistics from Microsoft and the product was called Cloud Knox, and Microsoft acquired it. So that's the technology that's been brought in. It's so this is quickly just talk about this.
Yep.
It's currently in public preview, soon to go generally available, GA. So it's almost ready for everyone everyone can test it out now. It's currently not in the EU, but that's now that as soon as it goes GA, it will be available in the EU. But yeah, so that's where it.
So that was an existing product they
Yes.
acquired. Does that existing product cover other cloud platforms as well? Is it just Azure that it's
Nope.
focused on?
So it does do Google Cloud Platform and Amazon Web Services (AWS). Does cover those. So the three main clouds, I guess, is what we could say. Potentially for others, but I don't know that or anything around that yet. But the statistics from CloudKnox / Microsoft around this is that normally there's only five users only use 5% of their permissions. That's their statement, which is
Wow.
scary.
Yeah, definitely.
So yes,
Because I suppose when you're setting up a permission structure, a group structure, however you're doing that, it's always far easier to bump them one extra level, isn't it, or whatever needs to happen. So, like, my example of this is when you give people reader in Azure, and then they can't see certain blades because even though they just want to read them read only, they need certain like quirky
yeah.
permissions. do you know, you get into that when you start to really lock it down. It's like, I can't access something, like it'll be something around billing or whatever it is, because you need a specific extra, a permission, right? So at that point, it could be tempting to go, screw it, I'll just make them contributor, and then they'll just see like everything, if that makes sense. Or like I see that as like, it's a bit of a crime, but I can understand why that happens, right? To produce the correct groups and roles that you need for your organization is a lot of work, isn't it?
Yeah, and you may some of that may be temporary, that you go, oh, I'll give you a contributor for a minute, but then it's forgotten about. In some organizations, not all, but in some it's just we'll do it now and we'll sort it out in a week's time, and it gets left. Or users move roles and keep their permissions, so it's kind of goes back to the JML process and things like that. But
Yeah, so I suppose in that scenario, if you've got somebody that's been with the business for multiple years and they've moved between, say, departments as they've grown, they could
collect, yeah,
amass a horde of permissions. Yeah, exactly. And it might not it might be that, like you say, their JML process hasn't been effective enough at cleaning up those permissions as they've gone. Whereas this tool can then come in and go, no, Alan is now a super, super, super user. It's got more permissions than anybody else. Maybe we should, remove them. I suppose, upper management, we can sometimes have issues there where they think they need higher level permissions than they actually need. So this is a great way to demonstrate, you're not telling them, this tool is telling you that you don't need these permissions, right? So it can break down those barriers as
yeah,
well.
and there is also remediation, which we've not even sort of talked about yet. We just talked about really discovery, seeing what the problem is, or not the problem. It could be that it's really good. But with remediation, you can in effect build custom roles to meet the users lower privileged access. So what it does, it depending on which cloud it is as well. All three are supported, but it will give you a template of the role. So for Azure, it'll give you the JSON file, or if it's got permission, it will go and create it for you. So
That sounds very convenient to me, to be totally
yes,
honest. Yeah.
exactly. So
Because there's one thing telling you all the problems that you have, and then it's like the next step is, well, how are you going to fix my problems? And what's it? It's called permissions management.
yes,
Yeah, is that what it's called? Permissions management. I want to keep calling it Cloud Knox, but it's not called that anymore. It's called permissions management. So permissions management's going to discover any potential issues, and then it's also going to offer up remediation for you as well, to start to give people the correct levels of permission that they need, right? And it's going to advise you of that. I suppose you could just take that information and do it
yep.
manually if you so desire, if you want that level of control. But I assume it can do some of the hard work for you,
Yeah,
right?
I mean,
So
even just taking the templates that it generates for you, so you can put it in yourself into the clouds if you don't want to give it permission to, is key, because you may have to put that through change management, etc., to get it signed off, kind of thing. I mean, if but
yeah, if you have change
well,
management,
if
I
you got change
suppose,
management,
yeah,
but also yeah,
exactly,
if the
yeah.
people you're telling that you're going to get less permissions is in the change management.
Exactly, yeah.
uh,
Yeah, exactly. Right. Well, I think that we could talk about permissions, Cloud Knox
yeah,
permissions management, Entra permissions management. I think we should do a whole episode on it. I think once we've had more
yes,
time, because it is in preview at the moment, and once we've had more time to play with it, I think we should definitely roll a whole session just on that, talking about what we found from that. But there is another element to Entra, the Entra product family, that we haven't discussed yet. And that's the last little bit that we're going to go through.
yes, that's verified identities or identity. So this is, I've not really dived into this too much, because I'm less identity side of things, more the cloud security and the Microsoft Defender products and things like that, and Azure AD, but not really looking at the centralized or decentralized identity side of things. We've got someone that loves this sort of stuff at the organization that we work at, but yeah. So I think this is more around yeah, individuals having their own identity verified and then being able to use it for work, for personal. Um, I guess it's kind of helped to onboard people quicker into the organization because you can verify who they are um, from that perspective. But yeah, unfortunately, I can't really dive in too much about it.
So
Go
is
on.
it no? But is this kind of saying that what we're going to do is we're going to somebody's got a digital identity. So you are Alan Armstrong at whatever, right? Like XYZ, right? So you've got your digital identity, but we're also going through a like we can go through a verification process to attach a verifiable identity to you, and that can then be, like you say, transferred between your work and your personal. Because I can't remember what we used to have. We used to have we have like GPG and Keybase and things like that, where you would create your own sort of like true representation of your digital self, and then you would link that to other identity
Yeah,
systems.
I
So
guess the idea
yeah,
from a and this is sort of my view of what I think it is. So don't quote me on any of this too much. Um, but I think the idea is that you build that identity, and then you can join an organization with that identity, and that could be your not necessarily your username and password into the systems, and you'll get the corporate email address and things like that based on your not necessarily your username, but in the information that's provided by that verified identity. But then if you decide to move on to another organization, you just get disconnected and you just move your identity with all your security and everything over to the next one. So I think it's just saving having to create you know the accounts for users and things like that in from Azure AD perspective and have to manage it.
so what we're saying here is that a person has a digital identity, right? And this is where the decentralized nature of it comes from, where we just assign an identity to a person, and then they can then use that however they see fit. They might use it for their personal email. They might use it for their government login. They also might use it for their work login,
Yeah.
right? And the idea is that instead of having an authenticator app full of like 100 different different identities that you have, because we all have many different identities, right? We're you know modern day identity and access management within the organization is helping the organization to reduce its identity footprint,
Mhm.
right? The amount of identities that are in the organization, like I'll call them duplicate identities, right? But this is on a per person, a per person um, scenario, right? So you're then saying I don't need 5 different or 10 or 20 different identities. I just need my own, and I'm going to choose who I share that with, but in a secure and controlled way, right? This
Yeah,
is this
yeah.
is
I guess it's it's
where they're
it's
trying to get to.
it's the user um, managing their digital identity, isn't it? At that point, and then just passing it to be verified to the organization they work for or to the SaaS application they want to view to verify that it is them. This could potentially be used for you know verifying who you are when you go to the bank, that sort of stuff. I guess.
Yeah,
So yeah,
yeah, exactly. But like you said, not really an area that we have seen in the wild or we have covered in any sort of production setting or anything like that. So that's why we're a bit at the moment, because I believe this area is relatively new for Azure AD
yeah. I
anyway, isn't it?
think
Because this was an existing product that's been rebranded again.
Yeah, I don't know if it was a previous product or not, but it's been around for 6 to 12 months in preview. I do know that the plan is for early August this year, 2022, for it to go generally available. So I think they've been working on it for some time to get it right.
Yeah, and what we do see in this space of security, identity, access management is um, a lot of companies are reluctant to take on new technology until it has gone generally available, right? So we're in this sort of balance period, right, where you can't really advise a client to take on a public preview at this stage, maybe to identify the solution and start to work to it. But until we see it generally available, that's when we really get the boots on the ground, work on it going forward, right? Maybe what we should do is once this gone GA, we should have another session on it and bring somebody in onto the recording that actually does this day to day, right? I'm sure we could find somebody
Yeah,
that could
definitely,
help us with that.
definitely knows someone. Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, okay. Is there anything else in Microsoft Entra that we haven't covered, or any other nuggets of product knowledge? We're going to go through availability, pricing, and bits like that, like the ancillary bits. But is there any parts of the core product that you think that we've missed and that people should be aware of?
It's probably so that's the only three sort of areas at the moment that we've talked about. Um, there's more to talk about in permissions management, and there's loads to talk about in Azure AD that we haven't really covered from a technology or product perspective. But yeah, I think there's some bits around there. But again, I think we should take that for one of our episodes. I think.
Okay, great. So we've talked about availability. So it's currently entries in public preview, I assume, at the moment. What's the current state of it, and when do we think it's all going to go
Yeah, so it's
GA?
public preview, and it should be the beginning of July. So it should be anytime soon now, is what's predicted. So I think it went from private preview to public preview. I think the beginning of June. So it's been in public preview for a month, and then I think they're going GA with it pretty soon. So
And you think that's because they've got current products that are maybe being rebranded and reworked slightly instead of it being a full, huge new product, and it's you're bringing like three separate products together in one interface essentially,
yeah, I
right?
mean, Entra as the portal. I guess you could say it's live in effect. Entra the portal itself, entra.microsoft.com, because we haven't really mentioned where you can get to it. Um,
No, we haven't
um,
actually. Yeah, that'd
yes,
be
would.
helpful, wouldn't it?
But yeah, the other products are kind of like Azure AD and Verified Identity are already there. They're just in effect remapping to um, sort of new navigation, but in effect the same product there. But Microsoft Permissions Management is in effect just the integration with Azure AD for identity into that product for now, and then being able to access it via your Azure AD credential. I think has been the main sort of push at the moment to bring it into the Microsoft world for now, and then new enhancements and that will come as they get it, as it starts becoming part of our day to day lives.
Yeah, and as we see, as adoption grows, that's when the feedback starts to come in, right? The user voices get, thrown into the air, and we get that cadence of up, cycles and fresh releases. So yeah, it's an exciting time for Intra. Do we have any word on pricing? How much is it going to cost? Like all this, I suppose we got existing pricing for. Well, some bits are still in public preview, so there's no pricing. How's it going to work? Do we know what's going to
Uh,
happen going forward?
so Azure AD as it was before. Yeah, there's a free tier. There's Premium P1 and P2 with various different tiers of functionality, mainly around the security side of things. Um, Verified identity, I'm not sure about. Um, and permissions management, I don't think they've released anything yet around how it's going to be licensed. I know that there's a 90-day trial as part of the public preview, and when it goes GA, they're going to do a 90-day um, trial of it, so you can get into it and take a look. Which probably is to give them a bit more, potentially a bit more time just to agree that pricing strategy for it. Yeah, I'm not sure which way they're gonna do it, whether it's gonna be user based or resource based on in the environments. I don't know at the moment.
Okay. So, because um, permissions management, I'll call it, not CloudNox. It's looking from more of a resource perspective, and it's looking at configuration more than anything. I suppose it's quite low risk to try on your infrastructure, right? Because it's, unless you do those remediations, it is just reading what
Yeah.
is there, right? Looking at logs and looking at configuration. Yeah. So you could potentially run a discovery using the tool and then decide whether you think it's worth doing automatic, well, semi-autonomous or automatic remediation, or actually attacking it manually and work on the new structure.
Yeah, I mean, there are other parts to it that we have not talked about yet. So there's other benefits to
Okay.
getting it, kind of thing, that we've seen. So
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. Cool. That seems great. And can we just talk about not Microsoft for the moment, maybe? What else is out there in this space? What is the collection of all these tools? What is the name of these tools? If I was Googling and I wanted to try and find Entra, what would I be looking for? And is there a collection of tools that's very similar to this anywhere out there in the world?
So I'm not too sure about a collection of all these tools together. There's definitely like for some of the products. So there's various identity providers for that can is it not say well, do the same features, have some of the similar features to Azure AD, and potentially verified identity. Again, I can't comment on that because I've not been in that space for long. Um, and for permissions management, I guess there potentially are some other CIEMs, so cloud infrastructure entitlement management tools. I've not taken a look, but I guess there are some out there because CloudNox would have been competing at that point with others at the time. So yeah, that's why Microsoft acquired it to bring it into the fold. So yeah, not off the top of my head, I can't think of any, but it's a new way of looking at things for myself. So I've not sort of looked for the other CIEM products, I guess.
Yeah, because I suppose we're quite aligned to our specific platform, right? So what we tend not to do is to bring in extra SaaS applications and to bridge gaps in functionality, if that makes sense, because then you can have a big like web of different products and licensing and all of that sort of stuff, right? So to have a singular bucket for it all to sit under, I suppose, is a benefit to people that are in this space, and are currently utilizing, Microsoft technology.
Yeah.
Okay, okay. So give me just a really quick high level overview again. Let's just recap where we've gone through. So Entra, let me read it back
Okay.
to you. I'm gonna say it to you again, and then we'll see how close I got. So Entra is a collection of tools for identity and access management, taking the existing Azure AD, but reworking maybe the user experience and the navigation of it to make it more logical as that product has grown over
Yep.
time. It's maybe become a bit unwieldy, so maybe they've just readjusted it and it makes bit more sense now. No criticism, but maybe I know what the process of building software is like. And then we've got permissions management, which is looking at entitlement management and over permissioning, whether people have got the correct permissions, and being able to identify people that need their permissions reduced, and also could help us remediate those. And then we've also got verified identities, which is really high level because neither me or you are in this space, is assigning a digital identity to a specific person and then having interoperability with other um, software systems and cloud providers and systems where you can share your singular identity for you as a person across many different applications and platforms.
Yeah, that sounds yeah,
Does that do
sounds
it
about right.
justice?
Yeah.
So, well, obviously, I came into this with a little bit more knowledge than just a completely not technical stakeholder. But I think that is, I think it's just the start of Entra,
Yeah.
isn't it? Right? Like, as in, it's a new product family inside of the Microsoft world, and I personally just see it growing from here. What do you think? What do you think the next steps are for it?
Yeah, I think they're going to bring in some of the other potential products, or maybe there's some new acquisitions that are coming to help with the identity access management across the environment. I think that's why it's sort of partially been done, as well as bringing the identity out from the other Azure in effect to make it its own you know product set sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, cool. Well, let's leave it there then for this episode. We're at 45 minutes, so not too bad this time. But everybody, if you're still with us, thank you ever so much for listening. We hope that this has been informative for you, that you can just listen to this without having to go through, droves of documentation to try and work out the high level stuff. We'll speak to you next time. But bye from me.
Yep. Thanks for listening. Speak to you soon, I guess. See you later.
Yeah. See you in the next one, guys.
Bye.
Thanks.